Welcome to Season 7, Episode 2 of The Sailing Show, the podcast that will steer and inspire you along your sailing journey. I'm Abby Ehler. I've competed in the Volvo Ocean Race and worked shoreside with the America's Cup and Sail GP. I'm also a director of the Magenta Project, a UK charity organisation that is committed to developing pathways and generating opportunities for women in performance sailing. On this podcast, I'll be chatting to a wide range of women within the sailing community, including Olympic champions, ocean racers, change makers, and up-and-coming champions. On this episode, I'll be chatting with Marjoleine Hulshof. Marjoleine is a people and organisation lead with Investec, an executive coach, mentor, sailor, and passionate about ocean conservation. We'll be chatting specifically about mentoring, the benefits, different types of mentoring, and how it can be applied to the sailing world. Marjoleine will be sharing her personal experiences as a mentor, as well as digging deeper into the role and reasons for mentoring. Mentor is defined in a dictionary as an experienced and trusted advisor. There has no doubt been countless moments in your life where you've leaned on someone you trust for advice or assistance. Whether the person you turn to is a teacher, a friend, a family member, a coach, or someone else, the importance of mentors is undeniable. These people can help to guide, direct, and shape your present situation and future opportunities for the better. A mentor is someone with which you can develop a long-term relationship that is centered around building the mentee's growth and development. A mentor does not work on a day-to-day basis to help a mentee make decisions, but they are there to serve as someone who can offer support, wisdom, and teaching over time. I started by asking Marjoleine what the importance is of having a mentor.
I think we all deserve mentors in our life, right? It's such a unique way in which you build a relationship with somebody. And I was thinking about it without having any agenda, possibly. So I think the availability of somebody who is dedicated to you, to whatever you need, to your support, to support you, and to sort of think about who is this individual and what are they trying to achieve and how can I best help that person, support that person. And to have dedicated time and space with somebody that is willing to listen, to invest in you, and knowing that you are supported, I think is hugely important. Whether you are an athlete or whether you are in a leadership role or whether you are entering, a new field or a sector, or I think that applies to anyone. What I think makes mentoring unique is that there are many shapes and forms of mentors. And even in a mentoring relationship, the role that you play as a mentor can change from being somebody's cheerleader to opening doors for them, for being a critical friend and somebody that you actually feel comfortable with saying things that you would not normally share or asking questions that you would not ask any other. And somebody who's really has your performance, your well-being, your growth, learning and development at their heart. I think for me that makes mentoring important.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think particularly if you're making a transition in your career, maybe, out of university into your first career, or in our world of sailing where perhaps you've come out of the Olympic stream and looking for that transition into perhaps high performance foiling or the offshore scene, it can be very daunting. And I guess having that person, as you've just described, can be a huge help in that journey. And I know you've touched on the different types of mentor, and I wanted to expand on that question a bit more later, basically when we're looking at who can be a mentor or for anyone that's thinking of signing up into mentoring. Mm-hmm. But maybe we could have a look at the benefits of having a mentor and just expand on some of those points. If someone thinking about it and they're not quite sure what it involves, what would be some of the benefits? And that could be in general, or we could make it specific to our sport.
So first of all, I think we live in such a hectic, busy, performance-driven world. And we know that people perform better if they take time to reflect, to ask for feedback, to think about what am I doing and are those the right things that I'm doing. And so to take time in a busy schedule for yourself and having somebody as your mirror, I think is hugely beneficial. So that in the first place, just to have that, carve out that time and space, which is an investment in yourself. So I think that's important. I think mentoring also is, the question that you bring is what you get out of it. So somebody who's really active in a mentoring relationship, a mentee that comes with questions, that has thought about stuff, that say, I've read this and I want to understand how that applies to me. That is somebody that gets a lot of benefit from a mentoring relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to be very articulate about those things, but coming in with a proactive sort of eagerness. And then I think the other aspect of it is that you learn from each other. I think there's something in mentoring that it's not a hierarchical relationship. Well, that's not as I see it. It's very much about, I learn as much from my mentees and from the time I spend with a mentee. Then I hope they would learn from me. And if you can have that kind of open relationship, to have that at any point in your life, I think people look back and say, actually, I didn't realize that person was an important mentor for me and guided or directed or helped me to work through certain things. But it's only in hindsight that I can see the value of that time or that person in my life. People often refer to grandparents or, that teacher, that when they look back, they were there at a moment that you were sitting with certain questions and they helped you think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great point about it. It's thinking both parties can benefit from this relationship and thinking about how you can help each other, and ultimately both parties will be richer for this experience coming out. And I guess when you're unsure about whether mentoring is for you, thinking from a mentee's point of view, as you said, it really is about the outcome, and having that outcome-based focus allows you to have those goals or targets in your mind. And I guess, as you said, the mentee's driving it, and it's really about utilizing that experience of the mentee who has walked your path before and can draw on their experience in ultimately to not make the same mistakes or to provide guidance. But that's a great way of thinking about it.
Sometimes I think what happens in a mentoring relationship is you start with one point, which is, help me come up with a plan, develop a plan of the things that I want to achieve and how I get there. And then it shifts to, there are some things or maybe challenges that I have on the way. How do I overcome those challenges? Or I need to think about the resources that I need to tap into because I need to widen my network. I need to access funding. I need to develop my social media profile, whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that the mentor is the one that can provide all that expertise and knowledge, but might be able to direct you. Have you thought about this? Maybe I can bring you in, link you with this person. So it's also the brokering of knowledge and expertise and access to certain networks that a mentor can bring.
Yeah, indeed. And particularly as sailing is such a network-driven sport. I mean, just having those contacts, being able to open doors that perhaps the mentee wouldn't have access to on their own, I think is vital, and especially in the sport of sailing. And an interesting style of mentoring I was recently introduced to was reverse mentoring. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
So, where, say, for example, if we take a business, a CEO, for example, might be matched with a junior, but the junior is effectively mentoring the CEO. I mean, a really interesting way of mentoring. And I mean, to take that on in a company must be a very sort of a company that's really striving to improve themselves to take that on, because it must be, I would have thought, very daunting for that junior to walk into the CEO's office or, any of the senior managers and effectively tell them what they think. And I guess the question that's leading on to me was, how do you start out in that mentoring journey? How do you make each other feel trusted, respected, that allows that open communication?
That's such a great question. I'm just sitting still with reverse mentoring. There's something in the term that I don't like, but because it assumes it almost assumes hierarchy, but it may be me. But we actually do it in the company I work for. We have reverse mentoring, and it's very much linked to the focus on belonging, inclusion, and diversity. It's very hard to understand, I think, if you've grown up in quite a privileged way, to understand what somebody else's journey has been, especially somebody who comes from a different background. And so to learn, you really need to create an environment first in which it is okay. It feels safe and okay for somebody to sit with a CEO or a senior leader or whoever it is and feel that they have, they're totally empowered and authorized to help that person understand who they are and where they come from and how things that may be happening in the work environment may be impacting them. And so I think just reverse mentoring in itself is not enough. It's also what's the culture in which that takes place. So just wanted to say that.
It's very interesting. And as you said, yeah, it's part of the wider company culture of inclusion and diversity. So yeah. But I guess to bring us back, it was really about breaking that ice in that first meeting. And there's every chance that your mentor, would not be someone that you would perhaps gel with on a friendship basis, or you might be from different backgrounds, different nationalities, different cultures. So it's really, how do you break that ice to build that relationship where you're comfortable opening up, talking about some of your goals and some of the barriers you're facing, how to progress, whatever it is. And it can be very difficult, I think, because, and particularly if you're sat at the end of a computer screen and you're not meeting this person in person, it can be quite hard. So I was going to pull on some of your personal ways, or even just, advice in general about how you create that safe environment.
I think I use my coaching experience, so that may not be completely fair, but I think there's something in there. It starts with building trust. And I think you build trust through a couple of things. First of all, I'm genuinely interested in who you are. And I'm also genuinely open to sharing who I am. As a coach, you wouldn't probably not do that as much. But as a mentor, I think it's very much, there's two people that connect. And they need to really understand a little bit of each other's story. For me, that is important. And storytelling is the way we connect as human beings anyway. So tell me who you are. Tell me where you come from. Tell me what's important to you. That's usually where I begin. And then I try to do the same. And then say, let's understand, what does mentoring mean for you? Why do you seek out mentoring? What are you hoping to achieve? And what were you thinking about when you sort of started before our meeting? What were you expecting? What were you hoping for? And so I try to sort of get a sense of where that person is, and then say what will be the best way for us to work together? What works for you? So that for me is that. So there's the personal part. There is that. What are we trying to achieve? What is in our head about what mentoring is? And I'll share how I think about mentoring, and then test whether that aligns. And then I'll go to maybe a formal word would be contracting. How do we want to work? What do we want to work on? And there's some containment, to use that word, into setting out expectations with each other. And I think if that feels right, if you've bonded in that way, I think you've started to create some trust. And then you go from there and say, okay, what is it that is on your mind, or whatever? I use questions. The power of questions is so important. Is questions around what is going on for you right now? What would you like us to focus on? What is this conversation? What will be most helpful? And then we take it from there. So
yeah, as you said, it's showing that interest that probably, as you outlined, that it differentiates it from a coach or another sort of role in your life. It kind of leads us on to the types of mentors, because we touched on it earlier, but there are ultimately different types of mentors. And I've seen this firsthand through running the Magenta's mentoring program, how we've got a wide range of mentors from many backgrounds. Some have come in as professional sailors that are really passionate about helping younger generation, or we've got people that have come from an education background or executive coaching like yourself, and therefore have the experience of leadership coaching and so forth. So there is no perfect mentor, I would imagine. And, you could be one of many and wear many hats. But I guess it still very much comes down to the goal focus of the mentee and them utilizing the skills of that mentor for best use, on their path. So I guess the question is, what is the best type of mentor, or what skills do you need to be a mentor? That's probably a better way of asking the question.
As you say, there's no perfect way to be a mentor, but I hope that takes away maybe some of the pressure or people feel like, gosh, I need to be a certain way or do a certain way. I think for me, it starts with being genuinely interested in the person that is in front of you and what they're trying to achieve. I think mentoring probably varies between different skill sets and different roles that you take. Because sometimes, as I said, sometimes you're the critical friend and you're listening and you're saying this, but the last time, you spoke about this, and how do you reconcile that for yourself? Could be a challenging question you ask somebody. Or it could be that just listening, giving a space for just listening and say, tell me what's going on for you might be enough. Sometimes you don't have to do so much as a mentor. Sometimes it is advice. It is, with the mentee I'm working on currently, we're very much working on what is the story you want to tell about the ambition that you have to join the America's Cup and be part of, or even lead a team, lead a campaign. So how is the story that you want to tell potential sponsors? What is your brand? What's what's the biggest story here? So you work on that. And that has more of an advisory capacity where I even bring in some of my business knowledge. And sometimes it is opening doors and networking and linking people with different things and different resources or literature or people that they need to access. And with the other mentee I worked with the Magenta Project, it was very much on the mental side. It was mental resilience. If you cross an ocean on your own, what does that mean? What are your thinking patterns? And so I'm not sure everybody would take on that kind of work, but helping somebody to think through what may be some of the risks on your boat, what may be some of the technical challenges you have to think about. How do you help somebody break down a big goal into smaller steps? And we all can bring different aspects to that mentoring, depending on what somebody needs and depending on your own skills. So I think anybody who takes up a mentoring role has something to offer. And so it's actually acknowledging that you have some strengths and you may not have certain other skills or strengths or expertise. And you bring in, other people that might have that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And that's something that I've learned through this program is really to focus on your strengths and what you have to offer, as opposed to trying to fill this hat of being a coach or a mentor, which perhaps isn't something that feels like it comes naturally, but it's being able to pull on your experience in the industry and what have you done well and what have you not done well, and then to be able to pass that information across. Mm-hmm. And so moving more specifically to our Magenta mentoring program, which is targeted women in our sport, and really to give them an opportunity and access that And particularly in those areas of transition, it's one of the things that we've cited is about women responding well to having role models and mentors to support their career development and help them achieve their potential. And so I wanted to target really why, or is there more benefit for women in sailing under a mentoring scheme? And I guess it comes down to perhaps the fact that we're in a male-dominated industry, and as the underrepresented group or the minority group, it is harder to make progress. And so mentoring, I mean, how can it assist some of the barriers that exist for women in sailing?
I think it's very important. I think as a woman in sailing, you're probably in the spotlight a lot because you're one of few at the moment. It's changing, but it's still, you're one of few probably. And so in an environment where there are not many like you, being able to connect with somebody like you who may have gone through a similar path, or can share experiences from other sector but relevant to what you're doing. To also feel that there's somebody you can share questions or uncertainties or be vulnerable with. I say, I don't know how to do this, but if you're in an environment where everybody's constantly looking at you and you stand out, it might be hard to ask those questions. So to have a trusted person that you can go to and say, gosh, I'm struggling with this, or this happened to me. How do I make sense of that? Or this is what I want to achieve, but everybody tells me I can't. To have somebody that says, you can. These are some of the things we can do together, I think makes a huge difference. And to also, I think I wouldn't underestimate the importance of role models, just to have role models so that you can see it is possible. Whether I see it in corporate life, I think in sailing it's the same thing. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, there was a great tagline in Irish sport about can't see but can't be, and really about the importance of young girls being able to see female athletes excelling in their sport, whatever sport it was, and really being able to look at that and think, yes, that will be me in 10 years' time, or, I can be a professional rugby player, or I can be a professional sailor. Just having that visibility and really understanding the importance of that. And I think you've really sort of nailed it as the underrepresented group. It's really quite hard to reach out and ask for questions, because I think that only reinforces the fact that you're an outsider in that group, in that crew, and asking for help is sometimes really hard. And I think having that mentor really, it's a more formal arrangement that allows you to ask those difficult questions that perhaps you couldn't do in your sailing team or sailing crew. In a controlled sort of environment. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're all female mentors. I'm very happy to see the amount of male mentors that have joined the program this year. And I think that's, really fantastic to see their support. And and obviously they bring a different angle to the mentoring and hopefully, a greater increase in the network in general. Yeah, and I think there's also the bit that we said about feeling confidence in yourself and your ability in that environment, and this imposter syndrome that often comes up with women in sport, where they don't feel they can do stuff, and there's this confidence lack, and because they just don't fit the pattern around them, and it's very, very easy to sort of pick that mentality. And so hopefully through the mentoring as well, it's another avenue of building that confidence, and even increasing your skills and through your mentor.
And I think also, sometimes, especially when you're, a high performer and a high achiever, you're probably also quite critical of everything that you do. And you may have people around you that say, you can do more, you can push harder here, you need to improve this. To also have somebody that actually cheers you on and says, this is great, where you got to is great, you're doing well, this makes sense what you're doing. Just that builds confidence as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a term that I've heard you use many a time is, the many different hats you wear, and one of them will be the cheerleader. And it really is just having that someone on the side that's has got your back, and can perhaps just see it through a different set of eyes. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but when I got into my career, I was one of few women, and I know that sort of puts the story you tell yourself is, I need to be tough. I need to be, I need to work hard. I need to really, be better than anybody else. And that's probably true. And maybe it's also not so true. And so having a mentor as somebody that says that the things that you're doing are the right things, that you don't always have to be so tough and so, harsh for yourself or tough on yourself. I think, that's really important. I think we as women can be quite,
self-critical, maybe.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very well-made point. And I guess as we start to wrap up, I just wanted maybe have some great stories or moments that you could share of success following your 2 years of involvement with the Magenta mentoring scheme. Yeah, anything that really shines, or any potential mentors that are listening in might like to hear.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I have found the mental work that I've done with one of the mentees, when she completed her ocean crossing and we sort of debriefed the experience, what she played back to me really made me both proud and humble, because we had worked on the capacity to make decisions under pressure in stressful situations, which is, I think, what mental resilience is about. And in the work we've done, we've gone through what if scenarios, what if this happened? And so that in a way the brain is trained and almost instinctively knows, what decision to make. And when she played back how some of the rituals and practices that we had spoken about, she had implemented those. She had taken cards with some of the things that we talked about. We had talked about a sort of a check at 4 levels, body level, like tiredness or physical state, mental level, both technical, and then, of course, the sailing itself. And so how she played back, how those things had helped her. And those were simple tools. I didn't think they were very significant, but they were for her. And they really helped to ground her in that, you're on your own. There is stuff happening. There's not great stuff happening sometimes. And it can be scary at times even. And just how those things help, I think for me, that was a beautiful moment. And more recently, with my recent mentee, is she sent me a WhatsApp recently, like, I've been talking with he's the captain of an America's Cup team, and we're going to have a conversation. He's going to interview me, and I might have a chance. And so just to be part of that journey, and that was incredible. So pleased with that. Yeah,
a sense of reward, as you said, to be able to share on that journey, and perhaps that you've played a small part or a large part in it is just very rewarding.
She's doing the work.
I imagine.
I mean, she's doing all the hard work, but I think there's something about you accompanying somebody on their journey, and that is such a privilege.
Exactly. It's a funny one what you said about the cards with your mentee who had crossed an ocean, and it reminds me of my journeys around the world, and basically having those checklists as the boat captain. It was really important to have, and it was almost idiot guide checklists, because there's a point where you're just so tired and so on autopilot that your brain can't think, what do I need to check this off watch? And just having that checklist, you could literally just walk around and check off. And it sounds simple, as you said, but ultimately when you're so tired and you can't think straight, it's a life-saving, life-saving tip.
And I think it's what we realize is that the technical side and the state of the boat is as important as the state of you as a sailor. And so that's your physical state, your tiredness, your sleep patterns, as well as your mental resilience. And so to even have a checklist for that, I think, and that makes a huge difference. And I can imagine if you sail as a team, you would do something similar. Like, what's the vibe of the team at the moment?
Yeah.
How are we communicating with each other?
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. And yes, actually something that happened in real life with Team Brunel, where we had a few issues of communication amongst the team, and we ended up with a golden rule, and it was just 3 or 4 key points that just grounded us, reminded us. A very good point. And so on a final note, Marjoleine, what about if there's anyone listening in that's thinking about becoming a mentor? I mean, are there any specific skills that they might need, or any advice you could offer?
And it's not a lot, but in a way it is. So one, I think it's important to just do it, because realize how many times in your life you're already mentoring somebody, even if it's very informal, even if it's a small moment. We all do that. And so the capacity to mentor somebody is probably already there. So that's one. And the second one I would say is it's good to have a little bit of a self-assessment. Look in the mirror and say, what are some of the things that I bring to any sort of relationship? What are some of my triggers? What are some of my own uncertainties? So if you are aware of that, it doesn't get in the way when you are mentoring somebody else. And I think for me, anybody who has done a little bit of self-work, whether it's coaching, whether you have a self-reflective practice, you meditate, maybe whatever it is, any of that is really helpful if you enter into a supportive relationship to somebody else. So those are 2 things I would say, good practice as a mentor.
Okay, that's fantastic information, and very valuable. And thank you so much, Marjoleine, for sharing your experiences, both on a personal point of view as a mentor, and also, from the wider world of life in the corporate world. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, that concludes this episode of The Sailing Show. It's been fantastic to listen to Marjoleine and to chat about how mentors can be your go-to person for advice and support during hard times. They're also around to celebrate your wins, as Marjoleine explained, your cheerleaders. For students and professionals alike, it pays to be both a mentor and have a mentor to help navigate life's ups and downs. If you've enjoyed the show, then please subscribe and share this episode if you know someone who would benefit from listening. And please continue to follow the Magenta Project on our website and social media. Look out for the handle at the Magenta Proj. And to keep up to date on women's sport in general, not just sailing, check out WiSP Sports online and social media. Thanks for your time.